Hey, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Kaylee, and this is a Read Rant Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. I read a crazy book that you guys voted on or that I found one way or another, and I tell you all about it. I give you a beat-by-beat, chapter-by-chapter breakdown of whatever it happens to be. Last week, over 5,000 of you guys voted on the poll that I had up about what thriller that I would do next. And The Guest List by Lucy Foley won by quite a bit. So The Guest List, in case you're unfamiliar, this is by Lucy Foley, as stated, published in 2020, 319 pages, and currently on Goodreads with over 1.2 million ratings, is sitting at a 3.8, which I think is pretty fair, to be honest. I'll go ahead and read you the book description. I'll give you a couple disclaimers, and we'll dive right in. But I do, for returning people on the channel, I do want to acknowledge my empty bookcase. We are slowly but surely packing, and I will be in a new house and filming setup and all of that other stuff in the next little while. So it might just look a little bit bare in the background. So if you guys can just put up with me for a little bit, we'll get back on a good grind here soon. So the book description on Goodreads. On an island off of the coast of Ireland, guests gather to celebrate two people joining their lives together as one. The groom, handsome and charming, a rising television star. The bride, smart and ambitious, a magazine publisher. It's a wedding for a magazine or for a celebrity. The designer dress, the remote location, the luxe party favors, the boutique whiskey. The cell phone service may be spotty, and the waves may be rough, but every detail has been expertly planned and will be expertly executed. But perfection is for plans, and people are all too human. As the champagne is popped and the festivities begin, resentments and petty jealousies begin to mingle with the reminiscences. Reminiscences is a terrible word. Okay. And well wishes. The groomsmen begin the drinking game from their school days. The bridesmaid not so accidentally ruins her dress. The bride's oldest male friend gives an uncomfortably caring toast. And then someone turns up dead. Who didn't wish the happy couple well? And perhaps more important, why? Dun dun dun. So this is in fact an eerie, isolated, like, you know what I mean, trapped in one room, basically, type setup for the book. Really interesting. A really good premise. I think immediately my only critique, or like primary critique, is that it's very slow. There is a lot of build to it. I think the payoff is pretty okay, but it definitely took a lot to get through, like, the beginning 40% of the book. I will wholeheartedly admit that. And I think a lot of the Goodreads comments have, like, similar, belief that was an issue. And then the disclaimers before we get any further. So the first one is, this will contain all of the spoilers, right? Like I said earlier, it'll be a beat by beat, chapter by chapter breakdown. Go read the book, listen to it, whatever, if you don't want this to be spoiled for you. The second disclaimer is that my reviews are not for authors. It's not for friends, fans, family, stans, anything of the like. My reviews are for readers, and that's about it, right? My number one rule on the channel is don't make it weird, right? Not asking for a lot here. And the third and final disclaimer is a content or trigger warning that I like to put on my videos so that you know what we're getting into. However, right, with this being a thriller, I'm not really doing that just because, again, a lot of the twists and the turns and the mystery and air of a thriller book relies pretty heavily on what would usually be triggering content or content listed in trigger warnings. So I'm not doing it, right? I would say that viewer discretion is advised. There are some pretty heavy topics that get brought up. And if at any point you need to tap out, protect your peace, right? There's no judgment here. Viewer discretion is advised. The only other thing that I would like to note before we begin is I don't know what the heck happened. Usually as I listen to the book, I will take notes, and somehow the syncing or something got like goofed up between my phone and my laptop, and I completely lost all of my highlights of the book. So I still have my notes, I just don't have my highlights. It's kind of weird. I don't know. So I'm not going to be reading any quotes. I refuse, and I need to get this video out. So I'm just going to be doing like a summary, which isn't really any different unless you're very familiar with how I do my videos. It might be slightly different from that, but it'll be a rant review nonetheless, okay? Now, without further ado, let's begin. So the guest list begins, right? We open up on a, like we said in the book description, pretty well lays the foundation of what we're dealing with here. This creepy island off of the coast of Ireland. You got these two really like hot, popular people getting married, and we get all of the wedding drama. The first chapter opens up with the lights cutting out in the middle of the like after wedding party thing, you know what I mean? Everybody's like vibing, having a good time. Power cuts, and there's a bunch of screaming, and that's how the book opens, which is a hell of a way to open a book. And then in chapter 2, we get the perspective of the wedding planner. Oh no, it's Aoife, which I know is like a really common Irish name. Aoife, there we go. Okay, so Aoife is the wedding planner. Her and her husband Freddie have just recently bought the island and are trying to turn it into a wedding destination spot. This is the first time that they are hosting a wedding on the island, so it's a really, really big deal, right? She's a little freaky outy. She's running all around trying to make sure that everything is going according to plan. And so this book, or this chapter rather, opens up a day before the wedding, a day before the lights cutting out and everything going crazy. Very, very short time span. Like I said, we're limited to what the setting is, but there is about 1,000,001 freaking characters. And so whenever that happens, I try to throw up a list on screen so everybody can kind of keep up with what's going on. So I'll have that noted. Don't worry. But yeah, right? So Aoife and her husband are just reflecting on how eerie this island is and how all the locals have all of this like folklore behind it about how it's haunted and all these people died on it. And it's just like bad news. And then we meet the first of our like primary POVs. That's another interesting piece of it. And the reason that I bring up having like a character list, we have Aoife, the wedding planner, we have Jules, the bride, and then there's who we're meeting right now, Hannah, who is the wife to one of the, he's a groomsman, but he's there because he's the bride's best friend. And I'll explain it a little bit more as we go. It'll make sense in a second, okay? But we get these changing POVs from like 5 or 6 different people throughout the entirety of the book. And the, I guess, kind of like a POV thing from the night of the wedding or the wedding night where all of the shenanigans is happening. So if you're not paying attention, it can get confusing pretty quick of just like, who are we dealing with? Who is this again? What the heck are these people talking about? And that's why I'm bringing up, like, I'm thankful that this is a limited time and a limited scenery, like scene set thing, because that otherwise would be impossible to follow along with what's going on. But anyway, Hannah is arriving to the island on this boat. Obviously, it's an island. How else would you get there? Her and her husband are going. So her husband, Charlie, is Jules' best friend. They met when they were like early teens, teenager-ish age, and have been friends ever since. Hannah has met Jules a couple of times, but feels very insecure around her. Hannah has 2 kids, and she's like very motherly, and she didn't go back to work after she had her children, and just kind of feels a little bit inadequate and a little bit insecure whenever she's around Jules. And it doesn't help that she feels like Jules and Charlie are a little bit too close. And she's pretty sure that they like slept together, but she never actually wanted to ask and get that confirmed or anything. And it's just general kind of weird vibes. And she's just not really looking forward to this weekend. But she's trying her hardest, right? She doesn't want to be the lame wife. Like she's just trying to be cool. And the other part of this too is that they're like barely making ends meet, and they're going to this very, very ritzy wedding with all of these ritzy people, and it just adds to that feeling of just like not belonging at all. And so there's just these layers here where Hannah is like the complete outsider point of view that we get throughout the story. The only other thing to note about this is that Charlie very clearly does not like Will, the groom, and Hannah thinks that it's because her husband has a crush on the bride. Our next chapter is from Jules's POV. Like I said, Jules is the bride, and she's reflecting on how her and Will, her soon-to-be husband, her fiance, have only been dating for a couple of months, and she, to be frank, also feels a little bit insecure about this. She feels like everybody's judging them for how quickly that they're getting together and how quickly that they're getting married, but when you know, you know. And she's like very just excited I guess, about the marriage, but it's kind of weird because it seems more of a superficial thing. She's like, because we're so attractive together, we're so hot together, we're meant to be, like, very, very clearly. Of course, everybody wants to see us together, which, I mean, literally every POV in this book confirms that, but still, it's just kind of like odd. We also get a little bit more background information about the two of them. Will, like we said, he's a TV guy. He's on this TV show called Survive the Night, which reminds me a lot of, what is it, Bear Grylls? Is that what he does? He's the Survivor Night guy. I just kept picturing him anytime that they talked about Will. But yeah, Survive the Night, it's that kind of vibe. He'll get dropped off in some wilderness and has to survive the night. So he's this like really handsome, rugged survivalist guy that's like this incredibly popular TV series. And then she really, again, gorgeous woman who has kind of like the social media influence and this whole magazine thing that's ever more popular. And she's so excited for her perfect wedding day. The only issue is that like 3 weeks ago, she got this weird note that was dropped in their mailbox. It didn't have an address on it. It didn't have anything. So very clearly somebody who knew them, or at least knew where they lived, dropped it off in the mailbox. And it said, don't marry Will and don't trust him. Like, he's a liar. He's not who you think he is. And she really didn't want to believe this, but I think she kind of had like a weird feeling in the back of her head anyway that this note confirmed, and she's trying to stop thinking about it, but she has it folded up. And so on this day, she like opens up this little folded note and reads it again. And she just can't let it go. There's just something off about all of it. And she just can't shake this like weird heavy feeling from this note and from just kind of in general. And so she's, from her perspective and all this reflection and thinking and blah, 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 she's trying on her wedding dress one final time. Her fiance Will comes in. They're about to like get freaky. And then his best man, Johnno, Johnnno, comes in, interrupts, cracks a couple jokes. And Jules does not like Johnno at all. Like, just... I would consider it more of like frat boy type energy. Really, all of the guys that are the groomsmen, other than Charlie, have this like frat boy vibe to them. But Johnno's like the meathead. You know what I'm saying? So she doesn't like Johnno. And they kick him out pretty much right after that. And then Will makes a comment about how he has to go and take care of the groomsmen before they cause more trouble. And before he totally leaves, Jules tells him that the film producer for the TV show that he's on, right, Survive the Night, the film guy from that will be coming to the wedding. Surprise! And he gives kind of a weird reaction that Jules notes, which again kind of feeds into the weird feeling that she's having about the note that got left in their mailbox. And yeah, he just like reacts kind of weird, and then he runs off to go be with the boys. Okay, it's kind of strange. And then we go into our next POV, Johnno, the groomsman, right? The meathead groomsman. And we get a little bit more information about them. So, like I said, all of the groomsmen, other than Charlie, Hannah's husband, all of the other ones went to school together. They all went to this like private boarding school. They all come from super, super rich families. And it was like there was hazing and all types of stuff like that, where these guys all got really, really close. Johnno's going on to explain how all of the guys are, you know, rich, and they all came from rich families, but he came from like a more poor background. Like, he was only able to go to that school because of scholarship, and how he owns like a whiskey business now, and everyone else is like in economics or advertising, and one's a surgeon, and then this guy's an actor. And so that's the end of chapter 5. We have officially been introduced to almost everybody. Chapter 6, we get yet another POV change. This is the last POV person that we will get, and like POV change-wise that we'll get, and then it'll start just like repeating. So I know I'm info dumping a lot on you. That's how this book felt. Why do I care? What are we doing here? Is this necessary? I feel like you're wasting my time with all of these different characters, but it all does tie together in the end in a way that I do feel was worth it, at least to some degree. So our final POV that we are introduced to is Olivia. Olivia is Jules's little sister. She is 19 years old. She has recently dropped out of university and is just going through it. in life. Doesn't want to be on this island, doesn't want to be dealing with this wedding, doesn't want to do any of that, but she is the only bridesmaid, and she's trying to be supportive of her sister, right? She loves her sister very, very much, but she's just having a hard time. So much so that she goes and hides on a little cave on the island to get away from everything. And turns out Hannah, right, also feel like she's going through it and feeling like an outsider on this island, and like she has no friends here and everything's like so stressful and all the other things that I listed earlier. She wants to get away. And so she also ends up in this cave with Olivia. They share a cigarette. You know, Hannah tells her about her old kind of party days when she had all these piercings and would smoke cigarettes and blah, blah, blah. She's in her 30s. And so she's just reflecting on how much better, like late 30s, by the way. And she's reflecting on the good old days pretty much with Olivia. And Olivia opens up a little bit about everything going on with her. Mostly the fact that she recently had broken up with her boyfriend named Callum. Callum was this long-term boyfriend that she had that she's still trying to recover from. And she ended up leaving university like right after they broke up. And so Hannah is like, damn, that must have been a terrible dude if it was enough to make you drop out of college. Like, that's pretty bad. And Olivia's like, yeah, something like that. But internally she's thinking like, it wasn't Callum. Callum was a good guy. It was just all of the stuff after. And we're left with this like, dun, 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 ominous. Like, what could it mean? Right? And eventually they have to make their way back to the party. And yet again, we get more insight from Hannah's POV where she's just talking about how inadequate she feels. A lot of this is pretty repetitive. I guess that's like one of my other critiques about this book to a degree. But some of it I feel like has to be repetitive to get you back in that person's mindset, because there's so many POV shifts. I feel like there's a little bit of like reiteration that has to happen between the different chapters and people to like reorient you to like, oh yeah, that's where we're at. Like, that's how they're feeling today, and this is like what's going on with them, and then we can move on with the rest of the story. You can't just like dive right back into the middle of a scene with this other character, because that might be a little bit jarring. So maybe that's why it's repetitive. Maybe it's like an intentional thing to like ease the reader back into the new situation. Maybe. I don't know. Hannah and Olivia do eventually make their way back to the reception, dinner, hangout, party stuff that's going on. And again, the whole like repetitive mindset thing of Hannah feeling like she's inadequate to be here and all these other things. And then we got to that being verified, if not just completely rubbed in her face, because in the middle of dinner, they're all kind of telling stories and whatnot. And eventually it comes to people asking how Jules and Charlie met, right? The bride and Hannah's husband. How did you guys meet? What the heck is that about? And he was her sailing instructor when she was a teenager, and she had a crush on him. Thought he was like super hot, and they make some jokes about how he's like gained some weight, and they like lift up his shirt at one point and kind of like touch his stomach and make fun of him for not having abs anymore. Charlie gets made fun of constantly by all of these other grown men. It's pretty embarrassing, right? But he just wants to be cool by them. And so he's doing everything that he can to try to impress them and try to impress Jules. And it's just icky to Hannah. And so anyway, as they go on explaining how they met and how they had this crush, or at least Jules had a crush on him and blah, blah, blah. Jono, right, the meathead groomsman, says, hey, do you guys ever have sex? Hannah is like, again, that's a question she always wanted to know. She always wanted to ask. And instead of answering, they like play coy and change the topic. And Hannah's like, okay, that is an answer. That in and of itself is an answer. And then when she looks out the window, like kind of behind Jules, there's this like creepy face in the window looking inside, staring at them. So Hannah screams and she drops her wine glass and it shatters on the ground, and it's just scary. And on that note, we have a flash forward to the wedding night, and the lights went out. There was all the screaming. When they come back on, there is a waitress who is in there, and she's crying, and she's like, I saw a body, I found a body. And Aoife, she's like directing everybody to stay where they are and not to do anything, all right, like to make sure stay in your seats, basically. Stay safe until we figure out what's happening. But instead, all of the groomsmen decide to band together and go on a little search party. It's storming outside. It's just adding to this like air of mystery, right, that's happening, and tension and whatnot. And when we go back to the pre-day, the day before, we're in Jules's perspective, and it turns out that the face in the window wasn't this haunted, scary thing. It was actually Jules's father. And there's a lot of tension between Jules and her father, mostly the fact that like her parents got divorced when she was young, and her father's bringing his like fifth wife to the wedding, and she's like as old as Jules is, if not younger, and it's just very, very awkward and weird, and just adds, again, just like layers upon layers of tension and drama to the mix. Eventually, the conversation shifts. You know what? I don't even know if I want to do POV changes or if I'm just going to like tell you. I'm having such a hard time of being like, and now we're talking from Jono, and now we're talking from Olivia, and now from blah, 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 because it's annoying. It's really annoying to talk like that. I'd rather just like tell you the story just like in general. Maybe I'm just going to do it that way. So let's just note that, guys, okay? I might tell you the POV. I might just tell you the story. We'll see what happens. Eventually, the conversation moves to a game that they used to play when they were in school together called Survival. And they make a note about how Will was the only one who never played it. And then everyone is like hee-hee-ha-haing over that. And then eventually somebody's like, oh, it was pretty harmless though, right? It's not like anybody died. And everyone makes kind of like a laughing thing about that. And like, oh yeah, you know, boys will be boys. The term boys will be boys is used quite a bit in this book. But Jono has a pretty like visceral reaction to this that he like tamps down. And Hannah, I think as the outside perspective, she witnesses a lot of these conversations, and she is very empathetic, right? Very motherly, very empathetic, very just in tune with everybody. And so she'll watch these conversations play out, and then she'll note. She's usually the one that notes like, oh yeah, Jono had a really weird, tense reaction. I wonder if anyone else picked up on that. Oh, Jules, when her and her father are talking, like she's not smiling as much. I wonder if anyone else is picking up on that. So a lot of this like, you know, third-party insight, I guess, or maybe just showing that the tension is palpable. We get that from Hannah's POV, so it kind of like informs us about what's going on. But anyway, like I said, Jono has this like really visceral reaction to everybody talking about the game Survival, and Hannah sees that this is happening, decides to help him kind of change the topic, and he also changes the topic and begins to talk about his whiskey business, and Hannah feeds into it, and she's like, oh my god, yeah, let me look at that bottle, like this is such a great graphic design that you have, like I used to be a graphic designer before I went on maternity leave, blah 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 blah, and everybody just moves on from this. As the night goes on and the men get drunker and more annoying, the women all kind of trickle out, including Hannah, and she tries to get her husband to leave too, because this is the first time that they're on like vacation together since they've had the kids, and this is supposed to be their, you know, rekindling, and like, oh babe, like come upstairs with me, you know, like wink wink. And he doesn't, because he wants to stay downstairs with the boys and drink a whole bunch with them and impress them, and this is really, really disgusting to her, and he just refuses to listen and won't come with her. As she leaves, she decides that she wants to try to find Olivia, because the conversation that they had in the cave felt like there was more that needed to get talked about. She was like picking up that there was more that Olivia wanted to say, but maybe got nervous, or maybe, you know, whatever the reason was, Hannah feels the need to follow up and talk to her about what's going on. But they're in the room right next to where all of these guys are getting drunk, so instead they just continually hear people yelling and causing a ruckus. And so eventually it gets to a point where they just grab a bottle of vodka and a pack of cigarettes, and they go back down to the cave to continue having their conversation. And Olivia opens up about how it wasn't really her breakup that was bad. It was the fact that after her breakup, she was feeling really, really insecure because he had cheated on her, that she wanted to, you know, feel desirable. And how Callum, her ex-boyfriend, he was like posting all these pictures with the girl that he cheated on her with, and how they were having such a great time all the time. And she wanted to go out on a hot date, take some photos, feel sexy, maybe make him jealous. She's 19. This is like acceptable, expected behavior from 19-year-olds. So that's her solution. She just wanted to feel hot. So she put on a bunch of makeup. She created a Tinder profile, said that she was like 26 years old, right? She was probably 18 at the time, so like 8 years older than she really was, and starts flirting with a whole bunch of people. Eventually, she met a guy named Steven, who was 15 years older than her. I think that's older than like the current age. So he would have been like 33. His profile would have said that he was 33 years old. And she starts to tell Hannah about how, they had gone on their date, they really hit it off, and how he was so much more mature and cool, and she just wanted him to think that she was cool, right? Which is so sad. I felt it so deep in my bones about like dating an older guy and just wanting him to think that you're mature and cooler than being a 19-year-old that is still trying to figure your life out, right? So she like borrowed clothes from Jules. She had Jules's house for some reason. I think she was like house sitting her apartment while she was off doing something else. And so she like invited the guy back over there to be like, oh yeah, look how, rich and put together I am. Look at this really nice apartment that I have. And they like hook up there, and they hook up a whole bunch over the course of like a couple weeks. They have this like, crazy affair, and it's not an affair, but this crazy like, situationship almost, because they're not like formally dating. They're just kind of like hooking up, right? She wants it to be serious, and she wants to impress him even more. And so when Jules has a party that she throws, Olivia invites Steven as her plus one. And she's like, yeah, you should come with me. I just wants to look cool. She's like, this has to be it, right? All these people here are going to be dressed so fancy and blah, blah, blah. And we'll finally fit in, and this will finally impress him. This is what I need for him to be impressed enough to like want to be my boyfriend. Didn't go to this party. She gets drunk, like bad drunk, because she was nervous and just, I don't know, had the nerves all get to her, and she was trying to take the edge off and went too far, too fast, and was belligerent and embarrassed herself so badly that Steven walked her out to a taxi cab, gave some extra money to the guy driving the taxi, and he told the guy to get her home safe. And then he ghosted her. And that was the last time that they had talked. And it like really, really messed her up. And so Hannah, listening to all of this, a little judgmental about hooking up with some random guy that you lied to, who also, when they met up, he was also lying about his age, clearly. He was older than 33. That she's like, yeah, okay. She's trying to be supportive, right? She's trying to be supportive and cool with the story that she's being told. And when Olivia's done, she can again tell that there's more to it. And Olivia clams up and like starts to kind of cry and go a little bit catatonic, because there is more to the story, but not any more that she can say. So instead, they again part ways. And when they do, Olivia is by herself walking back up to wherever the like sleeping quarters thing is on this island. She comes across Jono, right? The belligerently drunk meathead groomsman. And he is very clearly trying to make like a pass at her, like trying to sleep with her. Again, he's like late 30s. She says, oh, yeah, get away from me, dude. Turns him down. We get his perspective, and he's out there drunk because he's just really, really sad and reflecting on life, and ends up talking to like these ghosts. He's in his bed that night, and he sees like a dark, shadowy figure in the corner of his room, and starts like crying to himself and hiding under the blankets like a little boy, talking about how it's not his fault and he didn't mean to do it and he didn't do it on purpose. So what the fuck? Hello? What are we talking about here, dude? But back inside the main building, Jules and Charlie are up late having a bit of a conversation. They're also drunk and sitting way too close and getting caught up on life. And she ends up asking him about what he thinks about Will. Charlie doesn't really say anything directly, but he's not impressed by him. And Jules gets pissy with him and saying about how he's jealous. And she's like, I know it was you that wrote the note. Charlie says, I don't know what the frick you're talking about. And the earnestness in which he says that, she believes him. And so now she still has no idea who would have written her the note telling her to not marry Will. Okay. So she ends this conversation with him, and she finally goes to bed. Her and Will are in the bedroom, and she gets under the covers and feels this like really weird, slimy, horrible creature thing in the middle of their bed. She thinks it's like a squid at first, or like a dead seal. Eventually, Will pulls back the covers, and they figure out that it's a bunch of seaweed in the middle of the bed, which is something that the boys used to do when they were at their private school. And so he's like, oh, don't worry about it, Jules. It was just the groomsmen. They were just like playing a prank. And she's like, well, it's not very funny. Would you play pranks like that literally the day before we get married? Like, that's not, time for games. And he's like, no, I know, it's okay, but it's good, don't worry. It's just, boys will be boys. Yet again, this freaking mantra at this. And when we get the perspective back on the night of the wedding, like we said, the groomsmen are getting together a little search party to maybe go and find the body that this waitress, thinks that she saw, or maybe figure something out. They grab like a first aid kit. They try to find some flashlights. They have flashlights on their cell phones, and they just go into the storm trying to figure this out. And there's just this like really, really weird energy between them and these guys on a mission. And it's like this, almost like I don't know how to explain it. It's like they're just excited to have a job, and they're almost like excited at the prospect of like finding something crazy together. Just kind of weird vibes, right? And at this point, we're in chapter 22. We're like a third of the way through the book, and Hannah wakes up to the day of the wedding. Yeah, this is what I mean about like the slow build up. Yes, there was like a little bit of stuff that happened, and yeah, I know we're laying the foundation, and that's the whole point of the beginning third of the book, but like, gosh dang, dude, I feel like nothing's even happened. Like, just dragging, man. So Hannah wakes up on this day. She's a little hungover, her husband's next to her, and she tries to make a move on him. He got into bed late, really, really late last night, and he was a little grumpy about it. Right, to be frank, because he was sitting there with Jules, and she kind of rejected him a little bit, and they just had this like, well, she didn't reject him, but they got this little fight, so he just didn't want to do anything with his wife, which is so crap. I feel so bad for Hannah in this book. But anyway, she tries to make a move. He turns her down. She's upset, so she decides to go for a walk. She goes outside, and she's walking about, and ends up stumbling across one of the like many graveyards. Again, haunted island, known by the locals as being haunted because of all the people that have died there and the bogs and how it had been abandoned because of, XYZ, ghosts, etc. She comes across a grave, and she's looking at it, and it's for somebody named Darcy Malone. And before she can really read any more about this person, Aoife finds her. And Aoife says, hey, don't go that direction. You're going to end up in the bog, and you're going to end up, like, sinking. And I don't want any liabilities here, okay? Go back to your friggin' room. Or go that way, and then go up the hill, and stay on track, and then you'll end up getting some cell phone reception, and you can go and make a phone call. It's, like, the only place on the island that there's able to have cell phone reception. She goes up there, she, calls her kids, touches base with them. She ends this phone call talking to her mom for a little bit. And her and her mom are talking about how this time of year is particularly hard because this is the time of year when they lost Alice. Alice is Hannah's little sister who had taken her own life a couple of years ago when she was in university, when she was at school. And this is when Hannah realizes that she feels such like a closeness and like this deep care for Olivia because Olivia reminds her of her little sister Alice, who is now passed. Eventually, after kind of coming to this realization and reflecting a little bit more about her sister and the loss of her, she makes her way back down to the building. She gets stuck in the bog at one point. Some of the groomsmen find her and they pull her out, and she just gets this like really icky, gross feeling. Like all of the groomsmen are just bad, creepy vibes to them. Again, just that frat boy thing. We cut back to Aoife's perspective, right? Again, this is the morning of the wedding, the morning of the big day. So her and her husband are frantically running around trying to make sure that everything is going well. And so when she gets stopped at one point by Will, who tells her about finding seaweed in their bed, she freaks out a little bit. And he's like, no, it's cool. It was the groomsmen. I don't know. One of them did something weird, but it's all good. Don't worry about it. And then he goes on to like overtly flirt with her. And she's not interested, and she knows that this is maybe a power play for him and how he's just a very charismatic person that like tricks you and makes you feel like you're the only person in the room. And just, I don't know, she just can read this man and she's just like, no, this is weird. And because she doesn't reciprocate this flirting, or she doesn't act all like, oh my God, he's flirting with me about it, he like kind of like crouches in on her a little bit and tries to like intimidate her. And he like puts his hand on her shoulder and kind of like, with enough of a pressure to seem weird, just like very off-putting about this guy. And she's like, what in the heck is happening? She says it's a reminder that he is the one in charge. And then eventually he like puts back on his little smiley face and turns and leaves. And she's just like, oh my God, that guy's like not who he thinks, or like not who he pretends to be. Uh-oh. Jules, that morning when she wakes up, she looks outside the window and she's just trying to take in the beauty of this chaotic island. Like the weather, I cannot emphasize this enough to you, is not great out on this island. It has been windy and rainy and stormy and just like gross. The water is so choppy. It's not been a good sign. Like if I was a bride and I saw all of this, I would take this all as like a bad omen, right? But she wakes up and she looks out the window and she sees her sister, Olivia, standing out on one of like the cliff's edges, like right at the very edge, right, looking at the ocean. And for a second, she's worried that her sister is going to like jump from the edge. And then when Olivia steps back and she's like, okay, she's fine. I need to stop worrying about her. Like, that's not my problem. Like, I need to focus on the wedding and I need to get everything together. Like, lock in, right? She's going to like really bring it in and focus on wedding preparations. And decides that to do so, she pulls out that note that has been like eating away at her and tears it up and like flushes it down the toilet, because she is determined to make sure that her wedding and her marriage will be perfect, because everything that Jules does has to be perfect. Like perfect, perfect, perfect. I haven't really talked about her like very much, maybe in a way that is not doing very well for how the book did it, but the book was very good at portraying her as this type A perfectionist with like anger issues, and how she's like channeled all of that like anger and frustration with life into just being this, you know, picture perfect, gets everything she wants, does anything she wants, is like, if she puts her mind to it, it happens type of person, and is willing to do anything to get there, right? And it's done very well through the book, conveying all of these different characters. They all feel very, for as much like POV changes as we do, I do just want to shout this part out of Lucy's writing, is they all do feel very, very distinct. The way that they talk and they interact with the world and the way that they think to themselves and are dealing with everything, it does feel very distinct. Like as confusing as maybe it might have been to have so many point of views, the characters all felt like they did have some depth to them and their own logic and reasoning for everything that they were doing. And in that regard, I was very impressed. I would definitely read more books by this author. Speaking of POV changes, we cut to later that night after all of the shenanigans and the groomsmen out searching the island trying to find this body. And it's just tension rising among the group. And the storm is worsening. The storm is the reason that the power cut out. And so the wind's blowing. They can barely hear each other over the wind and the thunder. And it's just raining so hard. And it's just like miserable. And they're getting a little paranoid. You know, everyone's seeing something out of the corner of their eye and how freaking dark it is. And it's like anything that's at the edge of your flashlight, you have no idea what it could be. And it's just like building this like really, really scary tension with these guys. Olivia, that morning when she was looking out over the cliff and she's watching all of the guests arrive, right? Because it was only the wedding party that was there the night before for the little party and hangout sesh. Today, all of the other people are arriving. And so Olivia was watching all of this and thinking about life and her conversations that she's had with Hannah and how bad she feels. And realizing that she feels just guilty and she needs to talk to Hannah and she just needs to lay it all out. And so when she goes inside to try to find her, to finally get all this stuff off of her chest because she feels like she can trust her, she finds Hannah and Charlie fighting and in the middle of an argument. And so she shuts down because she's like, oh, I don't need to, I'm just some teenager adding to this lady's problem who's already dealing with enough other stuff. I don't know why I thought that I could talk to her. And shuts back down. Aoife is down at the docks greeting all of the people coming into the island, and she's talking to the boat captain, who is telling her that there is a terrible, terrible storm rolling in that night. And then we get to hear from Jono. It's been a while. We find out quite a bit about him, mostly the fact that he and Will have been friends for the longest of anybody, but they kind of maybe haven't been talking as much lately, and that he pretty much asked Will if he would be the best man, and Will said yes, instead of the other way around of Will asking him to be the best man. Does that make sense? It's also revealed through his point of view that the reason that Will didn't have to do that game of survival, and throughout the book they've made jokes about how Will could get away with murder, Will could get away with anything, it's because his dad is the headmaster. And so his dad arrives that day, and it's like all of the groomsmen like sit a little bit straighter and get scared because the dad is the headmaster and he's finally arrived, and the boys just feel like they're back in school again. There's also a note about how Will had aced the GCSE exams, which I'm pretty sure over in Europe, it's like the exams to get into university, right? They were all in this like private public school, and then the GCSE is what you do to get into like uni. I think, I don't know. I'm a dumb American. We have other acronyms for those tests. So despite being like a terrible student and skipping class and just being a general like shithead, Will aced these. And the assumption was always that he like kind of cheated, and he definitely did, but he got away with it because of his dad. And the final thing from his chapter is Jono reflects about a boy that they called Loner, who used to be obsessed with Will. And it's just kind of this like brief little mention about Loner. He's been brought up a couple of times, pretty much any time that Johnny has a chapter. He's thinking about all of their boyhood and reflecting on all of their time at the school and all this stuff, and thinking about Will and thinking about Loner. So yeah, Loner was just this kid that just like wanted to be accepted. Very kind of similar to Charlie, right? Just kind of this outside kid came in. He was a couple years younger than them, and he just wanted to be a part of the cool kid club. And so he would do anything for the guys. It might be revealed a little bit later, but he would like clean all of their sporting equipment, clean their rooms, do anything for them to like be seen as cool. So he's thinking about him, and then finally it's about time to go to the ceremony, and Will stops Jono and says, "Hey, don't embarrass me." Oh, a little venomous, a little off-putting, a little tense, a little weird. He says, "Okay, I'll try not to." Jules is over in her room getting ready for the ceremony. She puts on a little gold crown on her head that's like this gorgeous adornment thing. It's got some diamonds. It's a little kind of florally design. It's gorgeous. And it's revealed to us that the night before, when her dad showed up, that was the first time that her dad met her fiance. That was the first time that they met, on the day of her wedding, basically. Not good. And she asks her dad, kind of like, not willingly, because she's like, I know I don't really respect my dad's opinions on love because he's had 5 wives, and I don't really respect his opinion on anything because he hasn't been a great dad. He's always too busy for his kids, and he has been his whole life, and it's nothing new and nothing different, and I don't even know why I care, but Dad, what do you think of my husband? And when the dad is not impressed, Jules is pissed. She's very, very angry and goes off on him and blames him for being absent in her life, and says, at least you owe it to me to like pretend to like him and just walk me down the aisle and pretend to be happy for me, which is so incredibly freaking sad. After her dad leaves to go downstairs to like, I don't know, head toward the ceremony or whatever, she's left in her room, and she gets so angry. She like throws a flower vase on the ground, and she's like wanting to break more stuff, and she gets like this wave of anger. And I might have mentioned it a little bit earlier, but she has anger issues. She has her entire life. And that the only things that make her feel better when she's pissed off is to break stuff. But she's been trying to get it under control to try to fit this like perfect mold that she's like forcing herself into. And also because she doesn't want to be that way in front of Will. She wants to impress Will. They have not known each other very long to be outside of the honeymoon phase to really know any better about each other. And so she doesn't want to like scare him off essentially with her anger. So she ends up cleaning up this vase, kind of like collects herself, like locks in of like, okay, calm, cool, collected, happy, 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 and then leaves her room to go to the ceremony. And the ceremony goes swimmingly. It goes amazing. Everything's awesome. And it took us to this point until like after the ceremony for things to actually start happening in this book. Chapter 30, a little under like 40-ish% of the way through the book when stuff actually begins happening. And I had it noted, I believe it's at the exact like 44% mark of when I'm like, oh, okay, we're actually going to start paying attention now. Like, this is actually interesting. So during the ceremony, the whole time we're back in Hannah's perspective, right? Again, she's like the all-knowing perceptive person. So watching the ceremony, watching the different reactions from everybody in the crowd, and trying to see if there's any jealousy on her husband's face as they get married. And she just cannot stop thinking about that comment that Jono had made and about how Charlie and Jules probably have slept together, and it's like just really eating away at her. After the ceremony's over, everybody starts like drinking and having a good time, and Hannah goes up to Charlie and tries to talk to him and notes how he's been drinking a little bit. And there's some kind of hints throughout the book that maybe he has a problem with alcohol. It's never really outright stated, nor does it really play into anything particularly other than just like a general character trait to note, and that adds a little bit of like world building and tension between the two of them and like a dynamic to their relationship, which I think was done really, really well. Like I said, it's a little thing. It's just a little, I don't know, a little depth added to these guys. But the topic of the stag weekend, right, or the bachelor party comes up yet again, and it's something that Charlie's always been super clammed up about. Like, he came back and she picked him up from the airport, and he just had this really like vacant look to his eyes when he came back, and then she just could never get him to talk about what happened on it. And so now that everybody's been drinking and it comes up again, she like asks him, and he snaps at her and says that he doesn't want to tell her. And she's like, ugh, got it, okay. And she ends up stepping away from him because she doesn't want to deal with him when he's like this. So we cut to Jono's perspective, who's in another tent, drinking and hanging out. He turns around and comes face to face with the headmaster from their school, with Will's dad. And there's a lot of tension between the two of them. The headmaster's really disappointed to see him. He's like, oh, you're still friends with my son? I thought he would have had better friends by now. Talking mad crap and talking about how much of a troublemaker Jono is and how, you know, he stole those JCSE papers for Will and how much of a piece of crap he is and how, you know, just all these ways that he's gotten his son in trouble. And Jono's just like, yeah, I know, whatever, and just tries to like move on and get out of the conversation. Doesn't deny anything verbally, even though internally he's just kind of rolling his eyes at all of these comments, and he's like, if only you knew. It's just like real ominous type of vibe coming off of Jono right now. Eventually he comes across the film producer, or like the producer guy that we talked about, right? You remember how way earlier in the book, his real brief comment about how this producer guy was going to end up at this wedding, and Will's mask slipped a little bit in reaction to that news. Well, producer comes over, starts talking to Jono, throwing it back a little bit, and he's like, yeah, man, you know, I just, it's a real shame that you couldn't have been out there and you couldn't have done the survival show. Jono says, what are you talking about? What do you mean? So it turns out, Jono and Will both had auditioned to be on the show. And Will is the one who got it. And he went on to have this like really, really popular TV show and be the face of this. And it's like really, really big deal. And Jono always felt kind of bitter and upset about it. And he like missed out on this opportunity. He missed out on this chance to like hit it big. Well, the film producer tells him that, no, man, like we were going to have you on the show. But you left to go and do the whiskey business, you know? Like, oh, it's the whiskey business's gain. It was our loss, you know? You said you were too busy to do the show. Jono did not say that. Will had intercepted all of these emails because they were going through Will's agent, and had his agent decline the TV show on Jono's behalf. And apparently they were going to have like the two of them together on the show, and it was going to be like a pairs thing, or they were going to do just Jono because he's a little bit more rugged and more like the type to do that, rather than Will being this kind of like pretty boy. They were like, yeah, our demographic for the show is like all women and men hate him and blah blah blah, like you would have been the perfect person. And so, and then as they're having this discussion, he's just getting more and more angry because he's like, my best friend screwed me over so bad, and my life is ruined because of this. And there is no, internally he's thinking this, there is no whiskey business. He's like a camp counselor or something, trying to like pay his bills because everything fell apart, and he's always felt worthless, and like he was never able to get his like life together and do all this stuff, and how the TV show was going to be his big break, but he didn't get it. And so all of the whiskey and stuff before, he had like hired a guy to decorate the bottles for him, like a graphic designer, and then he like slapped the labels on some like super cheap whiskey on the island before he came over to like impress them and pretend and play the part of being this like rich, well-to-do guy, even though his life is like falling apart because of his best friend screwing him over on the TV show. Okay, like I said, we're picking up the speed here with this whole plot thing. So he and the producer are having this conversation, and he looks over his shoulder, and Will sees the two of them and books it over to try to interrupt this conversation, because inevitably he was never wanting this conversation to actually happen, and that's why he was so nervous about the producer being there. And so he's like in the middle of trying to like make his way through this crowd to talk to the two of them when the guests start panicking and screaming about how there's somebody in the ocean, there's somebody drowning in the water. And it turns out that it is Olivia. She, after not being able to open up to Hannah, after not being able to have that conversation, and this whole ceremony thing and everything just kind of hit her really hard, and she's feeling even more guilty and bad about whatever this mysterious thing is that has not yet been revealed. She decides to walk into the ocean. She wants the ocean to take her away because she doesn't want to think about any of this anymore. And one of the things that she does not want to think about anymore is the fact that the guy, and I don't know when exactly it's revealed, might be in the next chapters or so, but I'll tell you now because I don't really care. The big thing that she's trying to escape is the fact that that Steven guy that she had hooked up with a couple times and then he ghosted her, she had found out pretty quickly after that she was pregnant. She did not want a kid. She did not want to do any of that. She's only 19, so she talked to her mom, and her mom drove her like a couple hours away to go and terminate the pregnancy. And it was a really, really traumatic thing. And when she had texted Steven about it, he had like blocked her. He had maybe responded with like one message and then blocked her, and wasn't there to like support her or help her or anything through this traumatic time in her life or anything. Cool. So that's one of the heavy things on her mind as she just like walks into the ocean. She didn't really mean to start drowning. Maybe low-key kind of did, right? Pulling The Awakening by Kate Chopin, I believe. Old school reference there. And of course, Will, of all people, Will, Jono, the men, they all run down there, and Will is the one to go out in the ocean and save her. And he comes out carrying her like bridal style, saving her life, and Jono is looking on, and he's pissed off that of course he does. Of course he gets to save her and look like Superman. But in the middle of kind of thinking that, we're like really jumping perspectives here. Olivia is like yelling at Will to get away from her and to put her down, and all of the crowd around is all looking at her, and then Jules comes running up and she's like yelling at Olivia for essentially being like an attention seeker, and she's like, I can't believe that you would do this, like you can't get your shit together for one single day, blah 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 blah. Awkward, horrible tension on the beach, and all the guests are looking on, and eventually Aoife shows up and redirects the guests to go back to the marquee where the party will just go on like this didn't happen. Hannah tries to talk to Jules, and she's like, hey, you don't know what your sister's going through. Like, she's very clearly going through something. Like, this wasn't some personal attack against you. And Jules is like, I don't care. Like, you shut the frick up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And, like, storms away as well. We're just like, oh, good God. Just, okay. And then, like I said, we're bouncing POVs, right? So then we get Jono's. And Jono being pissed off about watching Will saving Olivia also makes him realize how much that he's covered for Will through the years, and how much his life has been ruined because of Will and for Will, and that he's going to get his revenge. Whatever the heck that means. And then we go into Hannah's perspective, and in Hannah's perspective, she is comforting Olivia. She decides to go back into the building, go to Olivia's room, and go and find her. Olivia has changed. She's just bundled up, sitting on her bed. And Hannah goes in there and she's talking to her, and she's like, hey, what's going on? And that's when Olivia opens up about the pregnancy termination thing. My bad. I was so close. I was off by like 2 chapters. So whenever she reveals this and she finally opens up to Hannah, Hannah decides to also open up and tell her about her sister Alice. She says, Olivia, I had a sister that you remind me a lot of, who took her own life after her and her boyfriend broke up on, I guess bad terms. I guess he was upset about their breakup, and he decided to send around all of her like nude photos and videos and stuff that he had taken of her. And it had like embarrassed her so bad, and she felt like she couldn't talk to our family and just couldn't escape this like tarnished record of hers. She was a very straight A student. She was like above and beyond in school. She barely even wanted a boyfriend in the first place because she was so dedicated to her education, but she got so swept up in this guy. They'd only been dating for a couple of weeks though, but her grades were already slipping. And so she had broken up with him so she could focus back on school. Like, their relationship was so whirlwind that like Hannah never even got to meet him. They never even had like a real serious conversation about the guy. It was so fast, right? And so when Alice, her sister, had broken up with the guy and went back to trying to focus on school and keeping up this like, reputation that she had built, and he sends all these pictures around, her like world came crumbling down. She felt like she had lost all credibility at school, and she felt like her parents and her sister would be disappointed in her and all of this stuff. And so she ended up like ending her life. And Olivia and Hannah bond over this discussion and these like revelations of the trauma and whatnot that they have gone through. And so Hannah like encourages Olivia to like, talk to her family and be open and get help, and that, it'll be okay. Meanwhile, Aoife is in the kitchen with her husband, Freddie, and she is having a breakdown. She's having a breakdown about the fact that Olivia almost died and how it would have been her fault because she wasn't keeping a close enough eye on all of the guests. And she had known that morning that Olivia was acting kind of weird, and she could just kind of sense it on her the day before that she was going to be a problem. But she had lost track of her and lost sight of her, and this other person almost died, and it was going to be all of her fault. And she can't take like another death on her hands. She can't be guilty about someone else dying. And it's this kind of like ominous discussion there as well, but just her feeling so sad. And it's kind of hinted at that and it's been hinted at kind of like throughout the book about Aoife and this guilt and this like whole death thing, and it tying to the island and her wanting to be at this island, and her and her husband buying it and trying to make this something beautiful because of whatever this like guilty connection is that she has here. And, how Olivia almost drowning was also really, really triggering to her because of whatever this like mysterious tie is that Aoife has to this island, okay? So this is, again, like a buildup that's happening, right? We have all of these loose strings, right? Every POV that we have these like loose strings that are happening. We'll just do a recap real quick for everybody just to make sure we're on the same page. Jules' loose string is that letter. Hannah's loose string is her husband being kind of weird, and her sister ending her own life, right? That's kind of the main thing there. Charlie, her husband, is being super, super weird about the bachelor party. Olivia was dealing with the horrible breakup from the guy that ghosted her. You know, Jono is incredibly pissed off at Will for ruining his life for whatever odd things that he's talking about that he covered for Will for. And then now Aoife is also feeling really bad about whatever this mysterious thing is on this island. Everybody has so much drama going on, and we're in the latter half of the book, and it's all going to start, everybody's going to start figuring out their little stories, and everything's going to start tying together. We also get a cut to that night when the guys are out searching the island for bodies again, or for the body again. And this time they run into Freddie, Aoife's husband, and he tells them that they've called the cops and the cops are on their way, but they're on an island. They have to come on a boat. It'll be a minute. And the guys decide that they're going to keep looking. Jules, in chapter 40, back in the tent where everybody's hanging out, drinking, having a good time, her father gives a toast, and she's listening to it and getting angrier and angrier because he is taking credit for all of her hard work. He didn't have any impact on her life and who she became. It was her. He wasn't even present in her life. And it gets revealed that her father's lack of support is the whole reason that she's even having this wedding on this island in the first place, because he took away his financial support of her, which I can't remember why he did this. I can't remember why, or if it even says why, but he had cut her off financially a couple of months ago. And so without her father's financial support, she couldn't afford the venue of her dreams. And so they decided to put all the money into the food and the flowers and the booze and the stuff that people will remember about the wedding. And she skimped where she could, which was being on where it was held. And she was able to do that because Aoife gave her a 50% discount on renting out this place as the venue, because this is the very, very first wedding. This is the very first time that they're going to be hosting that on this island. And so Aoife gave her a really, really good deal to entice her. Because the whole thing is if Jules, this really famous influencer person, has her wedding out here and she talks about it and it's this picturesque, beautiful thing that she posts in her magazine, then it'll attract all kinds of people to the island, right? So it was an investment on Aoife's part, and also got Jules a good deal so Jules could afford to have the wedding of her dreams. Kind of. To make her wedding of her dreams work out, right? So she's listening to her dad, and she's getting more and more pissed off because she's the only reason I'm even having my wedding on this stupid, scary island is because of my dad. And he's sitting here acting like he's doing me such a favor. Olivia, during all of these speeches and this dinner time stuff that's going on, is reflecting on everything. And she reveals to us that Steven, and Will are the same person. Ooh, she's having such a hard time with this wedding because Steven and Will are the same person. The Jules's party that she brought Will to as a +1, that's where Jules and Will had met at, right? Olivia brought him there. She embarrassed herself, got drunk, got kicked out, and then he went back inside and met Jules, and then they hit it off and whatever. And Jules had never introduced her family to her fiance until they were already engaged. So Olivia had no idea that her sister was seeing this guy. She knew about him adjacently, and she knew his name was Will, but had never actually seen him or met him or anything until they were already engaged. And turns out, yeah, Will was lying about his age and who he was as well. And we'll talk about all that stuff a little bit more later, but that's the big reveal. Steven was, or is, I guess, Will. And Olivia is the one that wrote the note to Jules and telling her not to marry Will because she's never had the courage to actually tell her sister that Will was this guy. She's never even told her sister anything. Her sister has no idea about the Steven guy, has no idea that she had terminated her pregnancy, has no idea anything, because Olivia got so depressed and embarrassed and all of this stuff that even her mom knows very little other than taking her to the clinic. She's just shut down, and she's especially not going to tell her picture perfect sister she's like just horrified at all this stuff, and she doesn't want to ruin her perfect day or her happiness or any of this other stuff. And so she's carried all of this guilt, and it's culminated to all of the feelings and everything that she's had on the island the last 2 days. But yeah, she wrote the note to her sister, hoping that maybe that would convince her and she wouldn't ever have to actually be honest with what she was happening or who Will was, but that her sister would maybe take the note and the vagueness, ominousness of that and just end the relationship. After her dad is done talking, the next speech is from the best groomsman, Jono. So he goes up there and starts giving his speech. And we get his speech from Hannah's perspective because, again, she's going to be our, third party outsider, super deep analysis of body language perspective of what's going on. He is making everybody wildly uncomfortable. He tells this whole story about how, he and Will go way back and how you always cover for each other and your friend would never screw you over. He'd never screw me over, would you, Will? There's just really weird, awkward tension that's a beat too long, and Will says, of course not. So, yeah, okay, yeah, I didn't think so, man. Goes on to tell all these stories about them growing up together and makes a joke about how much of a rich prick that Will is. He's like, you guys have been making fun of me all weekend because I've been wearing this too tight suit because I forgot mine. I forgot my suit, and so I had to wear an extra of Will's. And, funny story about that is there was no suit. Turns out he and Will went to go and pick out his suit, and he thought that Will was going to pay for it because Will took him to this really, really fancy designer place to go and get the suit made and tailored and all this stuff. And when the bill came, when they went over to the register to check out, Will didn't pay for it. He made Jono pay for it, and Jono couldn't afford that. Jono could barely afford anything. He was praying to God that his credit card would even go through and be approved to even make the purchase in the first place. It did, thankfully. And then when Will left, he immediately returned it the next day because he couldn't afford such a thing. And so he was all pissy about how, isn't that what the guys are supposed to do? The grooms are supposed to do? I mean, it's not like I want to go to your party. It's not like I'm wearing what I want to wear. If you're going to make me wear it, you should buy it, right, guys? Right, wedding party? Isn't that how that should go? Really awkward, uncomfortable stuff like that. At the end of his speech, he tells all the groomsmen to come up and get Will, and they tie a blindfold on him, and they say that they're going to play the game of survival. Since Will, being the pretty spoiled boy that he was, never had to actually do it. And I've never explained to you what the game of survival is, so it's been described throughout the book, and it's talked about some of the different experiences that the boys have had with it. And what it is when they were at that private school, oh my God, a cat just appeared. That scared the shit out of me. I heard a noise a second ago and I was like, oh, I wonder what that could be. And then I just saw it appear. I hate when that happens. I'm in a closed room. Where did you come from? The boys will choose whoever's going to be the survivor of that night. And they go and wake him up in the middle of the night. They blindfold him. They tie his hands and his feet together. And then they carry him out into the middle of the woods. And they leave him there. And the guy has to somehow get his hands and feet untied, somehow get the head, the eye cover off, and make his way back to the school. And that's the game. That's the whole game. Your buddies just, make it more difficult one way or another and get you all mixed up and confused and lost, and you've got to find your way back. Will never had to do that. As the headmaster's boy, as the whatever that he did, he never ever had to. And so Jono's like, I think it's about time that you do. So he gets all the guys, they tie him up, and we switch over to Jono's POV, and they take him to the cave on the island, the same cave that Hannah and Olivia have been talking in the couple of times earlier in the book. So the guys drop him off, and then all of the groomsmen make their way back. And then Jono says, hey guys, I'll be back. I'm going to go take a leak, go do whatever. I'll be back up in the party tent in a minute. But really, of course, he turns back to go to the cave, to go and confront Will. And this is where Jono has his big reveal, outpour, word vomit thing of everything that's going on. And so Will, being blindfolded, like hands tied, feet tied, whatever, is like forced to listen to this. And so he's responding every now and then to what Jono is saying and, you know, giving like arguing about it or pushback or whatever. But for the most part, it's just Jono saying like, hey, the whiskey company is fake. And I can't believe that, you know, I thought we were friends. And I can't believe that you cut me out of the television deal. Like, you're such a piece of crap for that. I can't believe that you would do that to me. And I really thought that we were friends. But really, you just didn't want me to reveal your biggest secret, right? Like, I was just a liability to you. I was just a liability. And the whole time there's been these hints throughout the book about like, what has Jono covered for Will? Like, what is he talking about? What is messing him up so bad that he's seeing ghosts in the corner of the room and hiding under blankets and crying about how he didn't mean to do it? Well, what ruined Jono's life was when they were boys, they played survival. And they played survival with that loner kid. The one that I briefly mentioned before that was like obsessed with Will and was a couple years younger and just wanted to impress the guys and would like do anything for them. Well, it turns out that Will had stolen the JCSE papers, and Loner, when he was cleaning Will's room, came across these test papers. And so to ensure silence from him, to make sure that he wouldn't rat Will out, Will gets Jono and he says, hey, we're going to play survival with Loner and we're going to make it like really difficult on him, okay? Okay, so it's just him and Jono. They get Loner out from his bed and they carry him down to the beach. And Jono, the whole time, he was thinking, like, this is so easy. If every kid knows the beach. We go to the beach all the time. We always sneak out down here. Like, this isn't difficult at all. Well, they're making it difficult because they tied him to the, like, handrail of the stairs that, like, go down to the beach. So they tied him there. And that would be the way that it would make it difficult. And the reveal, the horror of that, is Jono saying, I was too stupid to realize. Like, I was too stupid to know and to ever think about it, but you did. You had to have known about the tides. You had to have known that the night and the time that we took him out there, that the tide was low. And that we killed that boy because we had tied him to the stairway and he didn't get out in time. And it's our fault. Like, we killed this kid. And, like, that's why you've been my friend for this whole time. And that's why, like, you try to keep me around and blah, 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 because you don't want me to tell people that you killed that kid. Will pushes back and he's like, we didn't do anything. That was ruled an accident. We had nothing to do with that. Blah, 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 blah. You're, like, misremembering. You're just feeling guilty, Jono. That has nothing to do with anything. I don't know why you're acting like this. You know, just argues back. Telling Jono that he's making this up and that's not what happened and they didn't do that and, you know, it's not their fault. In the middle of pushing back, Aoife appears and she's like, hey guys, just want to let you know, Jules is a little pissed. He's a little pissed off at all y'all and we got some more stuff that we need to go to the tents for. So can you guys like knock it off and get it together? Like we need to continue with the wedding. She goes to like untie Will and Jono like leaves and all of them leave to try to go back to the tent. And so speaking of back to the tent, we'll go ahead and cut to Hannah's perspective. Charlie, her husband, gets in like a fist fight argument with another party goer guy. And she is so embarrassed. She like breaks it up. She pulls Charlie to the side. They go to the separate table and she's like, hey, what the frick are you doing, dude? You're being so embarrassing right now. Like, what is even happening? What? You don't act like this. Like, what is going on with you? And the guy that he was beating up was making fun of him about the bachelor party or the stag party thing. And Charlie's like, yeah, I'm just so tired of it. I'm tired of people giving me a hard time about it. And she's like, Charlie, what happened? Like, what even happened? What are you so upset about that you would literally like throw hands at a wedding, at the fancy people's wedding and embarrass yourself and embarrass me? Like, what could have been so bad that this guy could have said? So Charlie finally opens up about what happened at the stag party and why he was so traumatized. And long story short, the guys decided that they were going to also play survival. I think they were like in the middle. They were doing like a boating thing or a kayaking excursion, something along those lines. They ended up giving mushrooms to Charlie and then left him on one of the little islands, like offshore, and had taken all of his clothes and taken his kayak and all of his stuff, or canoe or whatever the heck it was, taken everything. So Charlie was on this little island, tripping on shrooms with no way off. Didn't have a cell phone, didn't have anything. He would have had to have like swim in the ocean to like a dangerous degree, a dangerous distance away to try to get back to shore. And so he had a full-blown bad trip, panic attack for hours. Like, the guys didn't come back for hours. He genuinely thought that he was going to die. And so when the guys came back, at that point, he was like, you know, cradling his knees, rocking back and forth, upset about it. And the guys had made fun of him so much about like being a baby, pretty much like being a ninny. And he goes on to tell Hannah that it was orchestrated by Will. And she's like, I don't think Will would do that. That doesn't make any sense that Will would do that. Why would he? That sounds like something Jono would do. And he's like, you don't know who Will is. And I think he's jealous of me. I think he's jealous of the relationship that I have with Jules. And I think he wanted to like get back at me or assert his dominance or whatever. And I think he was just trying to hurt me. And so Hannah, I guess in this moment of weakness, or this moment of like, why would he be jealous of you and Jules's relationship? Did you and Jules sleep together? He says, yes, we did. When did you and Jules sleep together? Was it when you were teenagers? And he doesn't answer. And she knows that that's not the case. And he goes on to admit that he slept with Jules after their first kid, when Hannah was in the middle of like postpartum depression and still had stitches and couldn't be intimate. He went out, got drinks with Jules after work one day, and they hooked up. And he's like, you know, it didn't mean anything, like blah, blah, blah. And she just leaves, like snaps at him about how what happened to him at the bachelor party didn't result in like any long-term damage. Like, he didn't die. He didn't break anything, like da-da-da. Like, he needs to get over it and stop sulking. And he's just a fucking baby. And then he's doing all this crazy stuff. And that he needs to pull it together. And she's like, I'm not cleaning up any of your messes. Like, I'm done with this man. I'm done with all of this crap. And she just leaves. Leaves him sitting at this table, head in his hands, crying, trying to like come to terms with what he's just admitted out loud. Also drunk, by the way, of note, just given their dynamic and their relationship and things I mentioned earlier, right? Oh. So back to Jono. Jono, leaving the cave after Aoife interrupted them, is thinking, like, what would I have done? How would this conversation with Will, how would this have ended if she didn't interrupt us? Because he is so incredibly upset. And he's so incredibly upset about Will's denial of everything and how this ruined his life. Like, Jono has been like wrecked with guilt his entire life since this happened. And Will's just moved on and lived like this happy-go-lucky, you know, successful, whatever. Like, none of it bothers him at all. And a lot of it, and the whole it being ruled an accident, and you know, it all getting kind of swept under the rug that they were playing survival, or that they had any, thing to do with taking Loner out of the room that night, all got swept under the rug because of Will's dad being the headmaster. You know, Loner's roommate even went on to go and talk about how they had taken him out of the room that night. And, the dad just like squashed all of that, everything. Just made it all disappear. And that's how Will acts. And Jono just can't believe any of that. And so he's just like stewing on all of this as he's like walking around. Back to the wedding night. Well, later that night, when the guys are doing the little search party thing. On the ground, they come across a mangled golden crown. Like the wedding crown that Jules was wearing earlier in the night. Stomped into the ground, all twisted up, like almost unrecognizable of what it is. And so then we immediately go into her perspective and she's at the wedding party when Will comes back from the cave, right? Being set free from the cave and whatnot, and brought back by Aoife. And Jules is understandably pissed off because her wedding has like gone off the rails. He got taken away, missing for like over an hour, and now his like suit is dirty, and she's like so pissed off at Jono. And so Will says, "Don't worry, honey. Like, I won't have him like in our lives anymore. Like, once this wedding is over, like, I'll never talk to him again. Like, you don't have to worry about it," which is awfully convenient. And then Hannah's off dancing with a guy that Will went to college with, and she's feeling sexy. She's feeling hot, right? She finally like is feeling appreciated and attractive and mysterious. And so like, yeah, fuck her husband. She's going to go and like have a good time. So Hannah's on the dance floor having a good time. Jules and Will are getting into it. And it's just this like rising tensions as we go into like the final like home stretch of the book. In chapter 50, from Olivia's point of view, back to what she's up to, she is getting as drunk as possible. Like walking around to all of the tables when the guests get up to go and dance or something, and like drinking all of their alcohol that they've left on the table. She's 19, right? I mean, I'm sure they would give her, well, yeah, I guess over in England, right? Or over in like Ireland. I think you can drink at 18. But she's just like getting like all the alcohol that she can get into her freaking body. Wasted. She ends up falling over. She runs into somebody that she knew back in like maybe at uni before she quit, or in high school or whatever the equivalent is. And she ends up like falling over in front of that girl and like embarrassing herself, and just like not good. And so eventually Will comes over and gets her because there was a little bit of freak out about her falling down. So Will comes over and collects her and tells them that he'll take her outside to get some fresh air. So he guides her outside, and then they finally have their blow up confrontation where she's like, "Will, I'm going to tell Jules everything that happened like between us. I'm going to tell her everything." And he pushes back and he's like, "If you ever would have, like, if you were going to, you would have done it by now. I don't know why you're trying to ruin her happiness. I don't know why you're making like a problem or a big deal out of any of this." Oh, and then he's like, "Why would Jules even believe you anyway? Like, you're just going to ruin her happiness for anything. And then it's going to be your word versus mine. And she's going to believe me and just think that you're being crazy." And she's like, "Yeah, but I have like text messages as proof," and like shows him her phone. He takes her phone from his hands and throws it off of the edge of the cliff into the ocean. And then she starts to think that maybe Will throw her off of the cliff next. Like, just to end it and make his problem go away, and how like terrifying that he's being right now. And then he goes on to threaten that he'll like release the nude photos that he has of her, and he'll go and share those with the world to like embarrass her and to keep her quiet and stuff. And goes on to just repeat the whole, like, if you wanted to tell Jules, you would have done it by now. Then they get interrupted by Jules, who calls them back into the tent, saying that there's like the next like whatever event is going to happen. And Olivia goes like running toward her and toward the tent, and like her shoe like plops off in the mud. So now she's missing a shoe, which just so happens that when the next POV shifts and it's later that night when the guys are all looking around, they find the shoe in the mud, like right after this whole mangled crown thing that they found. It's kind of weird. And they don't know whose shoe it is at the time, so they're like even more freaked out because they're just finding random clothing articles. But back to the bar, back to Hannah and dancing with this guy and hitting it off, and they're all having a wonderful time. And eventually the guys start talking about how they met Will and all of this stuff, until somehow they bring up Will's ex-girlfriend and how he had sent around this like, you know, like X-rated video of her around the whole university, and how it was like so bad and she got so embarrassed that like she dropped out of university because of it. And yeah, I wonder where she is now. That's so crazy. Like, I wonder whatever happened to that girl. And Hannah, hearing this and a couple of the other details that they say about it, she's realizing that they're talking about her sister, that her sister dated Will, and Will is the guy that shared her nudes and like led to her sister taking her own life and stuff. And it kind of gets confirmed too, because when they had first got onto the island and she met Will for the first time, he was like, you look so familiar. Like, were you at the bachelorette party? Were you at this like other event? Like, you must be a friend of Jules. Like, I've definitely met you before. I know you from somewhere. And she at the time thought that he was just being polite. And now she's realizing that he did recognize her because she and her sister looked a lot alike. And so she storms away, runs outside, gets sick, and just like wants revenge on Will. Like, all she's ever wanted to do is try to find this boyfriend that led to her sister's demise, I guess, that like ruined her sister's life. Like, she's always wanted to figure out who it was, but they never really looked too deep. And I think they talk about it a little bit later. I think my notes do. But yeah, she's like, I hate this man. So as she's thinking about how much that she wants revenge on Will, our story point of view cuts yet again to later that night. And the guys that are out there searching for stuff, they find the mangled crown. They found the shoe. And then now they have come across a body. They don't know whose body yet, but it's a body. And again, the POV shifts, and Aoife is in the kitchen with her husband, watching him cut up the lamb for dinner that night and admiring the knife and how beautiful this knife is and how it's like inlaid with like a pearl handle, and it's sharp enough to cut through this meat, and it's just like so beautiful. This like gorgeous, gorgeous knife. Well, a couple POV changes and story shifts and whatever. Jules, it turns out, had heard everything between Olivia and Will. And even when she had like walked out, because she was like pissed off about where Will had gone and couldn't find him again, and asked everybody where he had ran off to, and they pointed outside. And so she goes out there and she turns and sees her sister and Will on the cliff's edge. And immediately, like the way they were standing and the closeness in which they were interacting, they've only met each other twice as far as she knows, but they're sure acting like they're familiar. So she's suspicious of this, and she sees kind of like the fear in Olivia's eyes, and so she gets a little bit closer so she can hear what's going on, and eavesdrops and hears everything, and she's embarrassed and disgusted and takes her crown off and throws it on the ground and stomps it into the ground. So that's why her crown was there. So cut to her calling them back in because it's time to cut the wedding cake. So Olivia and him come like running back in, and obviously, kind of in doing so, might have just saved her sister's life. Like, Will was probably a couple seconds from throwing her off of the cliff's edge. And we get Will's perspective for the first time in the novel. And his perspective is, yeah, he was definitely about to throw Olivia off of the edge of the cliff. And how everything is like spiraling out of control so much. Like, this situation is getting out of hand. And he's always in control of things. And so the whole producer situation happening, the prank, like being pranked, and with the seaweed, and the prank with the survival thing, and then now all the stuff with Olivia, it's all spiraling out of control, and he is freaking out about it and doesn't know how to get tonight back on track. And point of view shifts back to those guys searching, and they found the body, and it turns out the body is Will. There's a huge pool of blood underneath him. His shirt is stained. His like eyes are open and glazed, mouth agape, very clearly dead. And so they start like wailing and crying and grieving, and they don't know what to do. Like, absolutely lost about what to do in this moment. Like, how could he be dead? He was literally, we just cheersed and just had our just had the wedding thing. They just cut the wedding cake. They just had the celebration. Like, it's only been a couple minutes. This doesn't make any sense. Speaking of cutting the wedding cake, the perspective shifts back to Hannah. Again, when anything important happens, she is our third person perspective, right? Our outsider. She's our outside perspective on the crazy happenings of these rich people. So she is watching the cake cutting ceremony and picking up that there's a little bit of tension between her and Will. And when the cake gets cut and they take little bites of it or whatever, Jules grabs a handful of cake and like slaps it into Will's face, like incredibly hard. Like, not a fun cutesy, like smearing, like slaps the shit out of him to the point that the crowd goes like eerily silent, like a pin, like you could hear a pin drop. Then Will laughs, he plays it off after a minute. And then everybody else laughs and joins in. But there is definitely a lot of crazy, crazy tension there. And also of note, while Hannah was watching the wedding cake be cut, she was acknowledging the knife and how beautiful this knife was with this like pearl inlay and how sharp it was and how much that she just wants to get revenge on Will. And just reflecting on this like anger that she has like stewing inside of her. We're getting these like more and more rapid POV changes toward the end here. So we get like Olivia's point of view, and she's reflecting on this confrontation that her and Will just had and thinking like, well, now she definitely can't tell any of her family anything. And he's made me feel small and unloved, ugly, stupid, worthless. He made me hate myself, and he's driven a wedge between me and everyone else, even my own family, especially my own family, because of this horrible secret. And she's like, I can't tell my sister. I don't want to ruin her life, but I could do something. And then the lights go out. And then we cut to Jules's perspective of everything that's happening. And she is acknowledging that maybe hitting him with the cake was petty, but also not enough. Because he has let me down irrevocably, like every other bloody person in my family. I overrode all of my carefully constructed security measures for him, and I made myself vulnerable to him. And he used me. Like, this is embarrassing. Like, he did all this stuff maybe to get back at Olivia, or he knew this, and he's like, just blah, blah, blah. She was a pawn to him, is what she's thinking. And so he has underestimated me. The rage growing inside of me, overtaking the shock and grief. I can feel it's blossoming up behind my ribs. It's almost a relief, how it obliterates every other feeling in its path. And then the lights go out. Uh-oh. And remember how she has the anger issues that we've mentioned on and off throughout the book? And then we go to Jono's perspective, and he's still, like, wandering around outside. Not having a good time. Really, really spiraling after this conversation with Will. I'm feeling like he's seeing the face again of Loner and how this kid has just like continued to haunt him. And he's trying to make his way back to the marquee and back to the party and try to find all these people. And finally he's stumbling around enough that he sees the light of the building, and he's like making his way to it. But then the lights go out. And yes, it's literally, and the lights go out on every single one of these chapters. That's how it ends. So Aoife, after the lights go out, she interrupts everybody and she's like, hey guys, don't move, just stay where you are, stay in your seats, the lights will be back up momentarily, the storm is just so freaking bad outside, it just knocked the generators, don't worry, we'll be up and running soon. We get Will's perspective again, and he decides to make his way to the bathroom. Like, after she had slapped him in the face with the cake, almost immediately he left to go to try and get cleaned up. So he's in the bathroom, he has like cake up his nose and like every freaking crevice of his face, everywhere. And he is, kind of acknowledging and thinking about how much anger was behind that slap, and how, maybe Jules did overhear the conversation between him and Olivia. And again, thinking about how it wasn't meant to be like this. None of this was, and everything falling apart, and, kind of the stuff that I'd mentioned earlier about how this is just not going well, and how carefully orchestrated everything in his life is, and how much he curates and deals with all of these relationships and makes sure like blah, blah, blah always happens, and he always gets his way, and it's all crumbling quickly and he doesn't know what to do. And then the lights go out for Will as well in the bathroom. Cut to the groomsmen standing over Will's body a little bit later, right? They're all freaking out, trying to figure out, what's going on and what to do next. And Jono comes into the light of their flashlights. He's sobbing. He's covered in blood. He's holding a knife. And it's the really sharp one with the pearl handle that keeps getting brought up. He's holding it. It's covered in blood. And the guys are all like, whoa, buddy, like, let's go ahead and put the knife down and start like, oh, what did you do? I can't believe you would do this to him. Like, so cut to Will's perspective in the bathroom, stumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out what to do. Aoife appears. And she has a flashlight. And she says, hey, can you help me come and try to fix this generator real quick so we can get the power back on? And internally, he wants to say no, that it's a waste of his time, that he's too good for this, that that's her freaking job and he has places to be and he needs to get the night back on track. But the faster that he helps her get the electricity going, the faster that he can go back to trying to fix his life, right? So he agrees. She walks with him back behind one of the other buildings and they're trying to find it. And all of a sudden, she turns around, and Aoife shines the flashlight directly into his eyes. And he says, okay, that's like really bright. She doesn't move it. And he says, okay, that's really bright. He says it with a little bit more force. And she says, yep, it is. And just keeps staring at him and goes on to say, we don't have very much time, so this will have to be quick. What? I suppose I just wanted to tell you something. Perhaps I should have told you when you mentioned it this morning. I didn't think that it would be prudent then. The seaweed in the bed last night, that was me. And he says, it wasn't you. What are you talking about? Like, that's something that we used to do in school. And she says, yeah, I know. I'm well aware of what you guys used to do in school. I did it. And he's like, okay, I don't understand. I looked for you for so long online, but William Slater, it's a pretty common name. And then Survive the Night came out. And there you were. Freddie recognized you instantly. And you hadn't even changed the format, had you? We've watched every episode. Oh, what? So that's why I tried so very hard to get you here. That's why I offered that ridiculous discount to be featured in your wife's magazine. I would have expected her to question it a little more than she did, but I suppose that's why she's so well suited to you. Entitled enough to believe that the world simply owes her something. She must have realized that there would be no way that we could make a profit from it, but I'm getting something out of it, so it happens. And what's that? Will asks, and he's like trying to like kind of back away from her a little bit and getting a little bit more and more suspicious and feeling uncomfortable, but he steps back and is like sinking into the bog a little bit and realizing that maybe that was intentional and that's why she brought him here. I wanted to talk to you. That's all. And I couldn't think of a better way to do that. What? Like this in the middle of the gale in pitch black? Actually, I think it's the perfect way to do it. Do you remember a little boy called Darcy, Will, that you went to school with? Darcy? No, I can't say I do. Darcy, is that even a boy's name? A surname? Malone? I believe you use surnames there. And then internally, Will is thinking, actually, come to think of it, it does ring a bell, but it can't be. Surely not. But of course, you'll remember him as Loner. Malone, Loner, that was the name that you called him by, wasn't it? I still have all the letters from him, you see. I have them here with me on the island. I looked at them only this morning. He wrote to me about you, you know. You and Jonathan Briggs, his friends, being Jonathan Briggs being Jono. I knew something wasn't right about the friendship, and I didn't do anything, and that's my cross to bear. His grave's right here, where we were all the happiest. And he's starting to put some of these pieces together, and he's thinking about how, like, I remember the photo of the teenage girl that was on the beach, and we used to always give Loner a hard time about it because we always talked about how hot his sister was. The beach being the one on this island. The grave that Hannah had found at the edge of the bog earlier when she went on her walk, it was for Darcy Malone, okay? Starting to kind of come together a little bit here. So she goes on to say, I don't have time to explain everything. I wish I did. I wish we had time to talk. All I wanted was to talk, really, to find out why you did what you did. That's why I was so keen for you to come here, to hold your wedding on the island. There are so many things that I wanted to ask you. Was he frightened at the end? Did you try to save him? Freddie says you came into the dorm. You seemed excited, the two of you. Like it was all some big lark. Freddie? Yes, Freddie. Or as I think he used to call him, Fat Fuck. He was the only boy awake in the dorm that night. He thought you might be coming for him to take him for his survival, so he hid and pretended to be asleep and didn't say a word when you carried off Darcy. He's never even forgiven himself. I've tried to explain to him that he carries no guilt for it. It was the two of you who took him, but you most of all. At least your friend Jono feels sorry for what he's done. And also, Freddie, like her husband? Aoife, I'm sorry, I don't understand. I don't know what you're talking about. Only, maybe I don't need to ask all those questions now. I know the answer. When I came to find you earlier in the cave, I got all of my answers then. Of course, now I have other questions. Why did you do it, for example? Stolen exam papers? Does it really seem like enough motive to take a boy's life just because you'd been found out? So then he's like, hey, Aoife, I'm sorry, but like you don't have any proof for what you're saying. I don't know what's gotten into you, but like what you're saying is not true. I'm sorry about your brother. I'm sorry there was like a misunderstanding, but it was ruled an accident. You know, and if you did try to push it, like it would be my word versus yours, and that'd be like a real shame because, you know, you're just this like grieving lady on this weird island with no connections and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, yeah, I thought you'd say that. So I figured I would have to take this into my own hands. I know you won't admit it. I know that you don't regret it. I overheard you in the cave after all. You took everything from me that night. My mother as good as died that night too. We lost my father to a heart attack a few years later. Certainly due to the stress of his grief. Then Will sees the reflection of the knife in her hand, and she stabs him through the heart. So Jono is crying, where like officially our timelines have merged. He is crying, and all the guys are confronting him and stuff. And it turns out Jono had come across Will's body when the knife was still in him and was crying and sobbing because as much as he hated Will, he still did love him, right? That was still like his best friend, and had taken the knife out of Will's chest, which was probably a bad idea, but he didn't know what else to do. And he was just trying to save him and just kept messing up and was just like crying and stuff. And then he had gone to try to get help. And that's when all these guys had found Will's body. So he looks guilty, but he didn't do it. And all of the guys, when he drops the knife, they freak out and pile on top of him and hold him there and blame him for killing Will until the police come. And then when the police arrest Jono, he doesn't say anything to correct them because he feels like it is his fault. They did kill Darcy Loner, right? Darcy Malone Loner. They did kill him. And that, like, maybe he does need to serve time for murder. Like, this is, like, him finally actually paying his dues for this, like, terrible tragedy and the stuff that he's done. So he doesn't fight back. I consider that jail cell waiting for me. But when I think about it, I've been in a prison since that morning when the tide came in. And maybe it's, like, justice catching up with me for that terrible thing we did. But I didn't kill my best friend, which means someone else did, which of course being Aoife. But nobody knows that, right? Because he's the one that ends up taking the blame. And that's how the book ends, is like with Aoife stabbing Will. And when we go into the epilogue to several hours later, we get like real quick blips from a couple of people, primarily Olivia, who is like sobbing, and then her sister approaches her, and Olivia thinks that her sister will like blame her or be mad at her or something. But she like embraces her and they hug for the first time in a long time and have this like connection, and she apologizes and tells Olivia that she heard everything and she's so sorry and believes her and blah, blah, blah. And so our book gets to end knowing that these sisters will be able to open up and talk to each other about their experiences. We also get a point of view from Hannah the next day. Her and Charlie are on the boat, heading back to the mainland. And obviously their marriage is pretty much ruined after the reveal about what he and Jules had done. And she's also just pissed off that she wasn't the one to kill Will. And that's about it. Olivia and Jules are obviously frustrated that they didn't get the chance to kill Will either, which is also interesting. I don't think there's anything else to say. I think the best way to end this book is Hannah thinking about how I clung to Charlie on the ferry crossing to this island less than 48 hours ago. How we laughed together despite my feeling so awful, and the memory of it stings. These people's lives have changed so drastically and irreparably over the course of less than 48 hours. This was like the game of Clue times like 10. This was really good. I enjoy this book. I really enjoy the premise. Like I said, it was a little bit slow in the beginning, so the pacing was like kind of like a little off in that regard. A little bit confusing, but I think that's the nature for this type of book. I think this book did a significantly better job of some of the reveals, like about Will being Hannah's sister's boyfriend and being Steven, like Olivia's Steven. I didn't put that together and clock that would have been the same person until maybe the chapter before the reveal, when they were talking about how they met. Like Olivia had told Hannah how they met, and then Jules and Will were telling the wedding party how they met, and there was like a little bit of overlap about meeting at this like particular party. And I said, oh no. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was really good. I did enjoy this book quite a bit. There's enough to kind of critique about it being slow and a little bloated and repetitive and stuff like that. Like, there's definitely ways that this could have been like honed in to be great, but I don't think it was bad. I think this is one of the better ones that I've read recently, if not the best out of the last like stretch of thrillers and whatnot that I've read recently. So I'm not complaining. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's stuff to critique that like I'm missing or overlooking or whatever. So if you do have critiques or something that you didn't like about it, I would love to hear about it down below. Yeah, I think that's all I got, man. Turns out people are messy. People are messy. And that's really all there is to say about it. So with that, I don't know what to say. I will end the video on that note. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you so much. I'm so eternally grateful for each and every single one of you, especially as we are wrapping up 2025 ever so quickly. This has been a crazy year, and I'll talk about it more formally in a different video. But I started this year. I started 2025 with like 2,000 subscribers, and I'll be ending it at like 32,000, which is crazy. Really, really crazy. Life is weird. This channel is weird. The support and everything I've gotten on here is weird in a good way. And so I just can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being here and watching the weird videos that I put out. I appreciate you, again, from the bottom of my heart. I can't say it enough. I'm getting repetitive with it, so I'll just go ahead and shut up. But just know that I'm so grateful. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.